Good afternoon, and welcome to the University of Melbourne's first online MedTech webinar for 2024. We're so excited that you're joining us today. My name is Professor David Braden, and I am Clifford Chair of Neural Engineering in the Department of Biomedical Engineering and the Graham Clark Institute for Biomedical Engineering. It's my pleasure to be your MC for our webinar panel discussion. Today we're discussing educating and empowering MedTech's next generation. I start today's event by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm hosting this webinar, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. The MedTech webinar series has been looking at the key technologies that are being developed at the University of Melbourne by our collaborators and by our close friends. If you'd like to learn more about our research and innovation programs or view any of the earlier webinars, please visit our website. For example, in September last year, we dived into the future of wearable sensors and their interpretation for improving physical health. Please note that this event is being recorded. The video of this webinar will be placed on the university's Faculty of Engineering and IT webpage. I'd like to welcome Zara, our illustrator, who will be scribing today's discussion. Hello, Zara. We're looking forward to seeing what you capture. All right, so a bit about today's topic. MedTech is one of the most influential and fast-paced industries in the world. With innovative technologies like bioactive implants, AI, and robotics shaping the future, there is a growing need to ensure that our workforce can access up-to-date and timely training. Today, we will have a panel discussion on the challenges facing the MedTech industry in accessing skilled personnel for domestic manufacturing and how we can go about solving these challenges. We'll delve into the skills and education gaps of today, explore strategies for inspiring and equipping future-ready talent with the specialized knowledge and skills needed for success in the industry, and outline how industry requirements and education offerings can better align to bridge skills gaps from advanced manufacturing to regulatory frameworks. Before we proceed with the panel discussion, I'd like to take this moment to thank you for joining us today. You are welcome to interact by typing questions for our speakers in the Q&A box to your right-hand side. Some of you have submitted questions via the registration form, and thank you very much for that. But should our conversation spark further thoughts or questions, I encourage you to engage with the panel through writing new questions or clicking the like button of the questions that you see that you want answered. And we'll try and address as many questions as possible within the time that we've got. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our expert panel now. First up, we have Professor Andrea O'Connor. Andrea is the Shanahan Chair in Frontier Medical Solutions and a Redmond Barry Distinguished Professor at the University of Melbourne and the Aikenhead Centre for Medical Discovery. She is a co-director of the Victorian MedTech Skills and Devices Hub and leads the Tissue Engineering Group in the Department of Biomedical Engineering. Andrea's research focuses on design, synthesis, and fabrication of biomaterials, porous materials, and antimicrobial nanomaterials. She teaches biomedical engineering subjects, including tissue engineering and stem cells. She collaborates with clinicians, scientists, hospitals, medical research institutes, and medical device companies to address clinical problems. Welcome, Andrea.
Thanks, David.
Next, we have Professor Rachel McDonald. Rachel is the director of the MedTech Vic Hub at Swinburne University. The MedTech Vic Hub creates innovative enabling technology, products, and services to enhance lives for people with disability, their families, and the people who support them. Rachel is a clinical, research, and teaching health professional with an interest in enabling people with lifelong disabilities to participate in life situations. She has qualifications in occupational therapy, biomechanics, and higher education, in addition to her doctorate. She has worked extensively in this field with both children's services and within both children's services and adult settings. She specializes in the care of people with complex disability, as well as development and evaluation into the effectiveness of assistive technologies. Welcome, Rachel. And finally, we'll be joined by Gary Haywood. Gary is a Business Development Manager for Design and Industry, Australia's largest and leading product design and development studio. With an MBA and as an experienced design engineer, Gary has worked within design, innovation, and business development for more than 30 years. Working within advanced additive manufacturing and high volume production, he has managed technology development and commercialization projects in MedTech, automotive, industrial and construction, agriculture, materials handling, and packaging industries. Thank you for joining us, Gary. All right, so let's get started into the panel. Welcome, everybody. Let's begin discussion by, first of all, I'd like to ask you, Andrea. One of the things that I mentioned in the introduction for you is that you are co-directing the Victorian MedTech Skills and Devices Hub, one of your many hats. Could you tell us a bit more about the Victorian MedTech Skills and Devices Hub?
Sure, thanks, David. So the VMH for short, the Victorian MedTech Skills and Devices Hub, is a collaborative partnering opportunity and centre working to support the growth and development of the medtech manufacturing sector, particularly focused in Victoria. So it's supported by the Victorian Government's Australian MedTech Manufacturing Centre, AMMC, and it's a collaboration of 3 educational providers, the University of Melbourne, Swinburne University of Technology and RMIT University, along with the Aikenhead Centre for Medical Discovery, which is a centre based at St Vincent's Hospital, Melbourne. There's a new building going up on the public hospital campus now, and this will be the home of the VMH once the building is completed towards the end of this year. So the VMH is working with industry and across these educational providers in a way that's a bit different to the way universities normally operate, collaborating with government and industry to design and develop courses and help the sector to grow. So we're looking to create job-ready graduates and more specialised medtech professionals, addressing some of the major skills gaps in the sector that currently hold back growth in medtech manufacturing in the state. So very keen to join the discussion and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. If I could now switch to Rachel and ask, tell us if you can tell us a bit more about the MedTech Vic Hub. And just a reminder to unmute, which I forgot to do at the start.
Thanks, David, and thanks for the reminder. I was talking away on mute. Thank you so much. Swinburne University is a relatively small but kind of quite mighty university where the vision is to bring people and technology together to build a better world. And so we, a few years ago, got a boost from the Victorian Government to form the MedTech Vic Hub. And really it's about kind of bringing closely, working with industry and community partners to bring together people really living with vulnerabilities together with kind of technology and experts in design, digitalisation, health and manufacturing to really create some of the sort of technologies of the future and to apply some of the technologies. So rapid clinical and technical prototyping. So I'm a health professional, but we have designers, engineers, and all sorts of other kind of colleagues in the hub. We also reach into the rest of Swinburne and across, of course, our partners at in the MedTech Skills and Devices Hub. And I guess just to give you a little bit of context around why we concentrate on this particular type of medical technologies, which is assistive tech. And that this has sort of gone from an industry that was really, really small to the NDIS, for example, spending $1.2 billion on assistive technology last year, and that being about $3.2 billion if we add in aged care and other sectors. Yet we import 93% of those technologies. So we've got a fantastic opportunity to really start to build industry. And it's not only is there an industry with import, there are issues obviously with quality of product, that can't be addressed due to supply chain. And then the actual sort of products themselves, people don't necessarily want to use. The advantage of this particular type of technologies in the Skills and Devices Hub is that it is regulated. It is TGA, under the sort of TGA regulation and compliance framework, but it's not as highly regulated as other elements of MedTech. So it's a really great test bed and way of actually giving people the skills that they need to work in MedTech, but MedTech light, if you like. Not that it's less important, it's just less regulated. One of the kind of advantages/disadvantages is that our TGA requirements for assistive tech are actually less than those of the FDA or the European markets, which is a two-edged sword, because one of the things that means is that we can be seen as a bit of a dumping ground for these technologies. But the other opportunity is that we have this industry that is ready to go, that we are building the skills for, and therefore we have an ability to build and market and test technologies in Australia before going on to that next stage of kind of European and North American. So we really utilise end-user co-design principles to generate and prototype solutions. We do research and development and apply new and emerging technology to these issues, but also key to this is educational activities. So education for clinicians, education for industry, non-traditional as well as manufacturing industries, and also lived experience. So I think I'll probably finish. We're really lucky. We work across the university, but we also work across the sector, and we're extraordinarily fortunate to be part of this, and excited for the rest of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Rachel. All right, and so I would like to bring Gary back on now and ask you, Gary, if you could tell us a bit about how D&I has been involved with in the medtech manufacturing space, and what do you see as the sort of main areas of focus that you see are developing within the industry at the moment?
Thanks, David. To answer your question directly, one of the key challenges with the transitioning and the translation of core technologies out of some of the research institutes and universities is building upon that positively and actually seeing it through to the marketplace. And so, our role as well as developers, we're a team of engineers, designers, software, firmware, and mechanical. So clearly, we're obviously involved in the core technology development, from concept generation, from human factors and UX, all the way through to manufacture and production, either locally or offshore. But underlying all of that are other streams, obviously, of business, regulatory, and manufacturing elements that obviously inform that development program. And so the core challenge with companies such as design and industry is trying to make sure that that's interwoven into the development pathway. Clearly a lot of developers, founders are learning a lot about that process of taking a product and translating a product to market. And we need to positively sort of reinforce that learning exercise, or whether it's a part of a team. But at the same time too, we're obviously very mindful of the financial constraints that a lot of them work under. And the ultimate goal, very early in the pathway, that ultimate goal might necessarily be completely defined. It might be morphing. So they may be targeting an Australian launch, and then over time, various parameters might mean that they're going towards a North American or a European or an Asian launch. So we find that the development program is a very multi-streamed pathway, and it's a pathway that does develop as the team learns more skills and continues to advance that product and that technology ultimately into a business.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Gary. I think now it might be time to bring the panel together and start to ask you some of the questions that have been posed. I see that we are getting some questions into the chat, but we also have some pre-registered, some questions that were asked by some people when they registered. So perhaps we'll start with them. And so perhaps I'll go straight back to you, Gary, and ask about AI. AI is quite the buzzword today. What do you think are the main needs for AI in health applications? And what barriers are there to actually using AI?
You're using the term buzzword. I'm always a little reluctant to do it because I don't want to make it sound too flippant at the end of the day. The future of AI is incredibly vast, and we're really just on the cusp of really opening up that business opportunity. I suppose in the earlier context of some of these development programs, it's really important to be able to articulate exactly what the AI component of your product offering ultimately looks like, where AI is actually creating features or part of the value proposition of the product in very simple terms. I mean, they're critical to laying out some of those corresponding streams that I was telling you about, from mapping out your compliance and regulatory pathway, right through to your appeal to for instance, an investor or a financer. So saying something is AI enabled is probably not going to cut the mustard. You probably need to be a lot more clear about what you mean by artificial intelligence and what it's actually doing to your value proposition, and in that context, what are the ramifications from a compliance perspective, which is still growing. Software as a medical device is still a very growing, changing environment. And of course, from a hardware perspective specifically, what does that actually mean? What does it actually mean to what we have to develop to support those particular features in reality? So it's always important to capture and articulate, not broadly that you're AI enabled, but what are you looking for AI to actually do to your product offering? And how you envisage it's going to potentially give you some sort of advantage with your product. Similarly too with elements of compliance and elements of reimbursement. The predicate environment is obviously not very rich in pickings for you to then go around and leverage off existing products, models and pathways that are out there. So you have to really have a very clear idea of what the ramifications are in going and claiming that you're an AI-enabled product or an offering for the market, and what that means, because it really does have many streams and layers to it.
Yeah, and I think that it did come up as one of the key aspects within the roadmap that was created for education in the MedTech space. And so I think as across the universities, we're looking how best to help educate people in that. So do you feel that we do need to put more effort into education about AI enabled MedTech applications?
Look, absolutely. I think, as I said, it's very early, and it's a complex process. It's a very complex process from a technical as well as a regulatory environment with your different jurisdictions, and like anything new, it's very important that you keep it within the context of what you're capable of introducing. Ultimately, keeping an idea of where your end goal is. There's no harm in that. But again, just make sure you've got a very clear idea of how it's adding value to your ultimate proposition, because the investors just won't buy that you're saying it's an AI-enabled offering. They'll want to know a lot more as far as what you actually mean.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Gary. Now, the other word that always seems to accompany AI is cybersecurity. So often they come in together, AI and cybersecurity. So can I go to you, Rachel, and ask, how is cybersecurity related to MedTech? Why is it important?
Why is it important in MedTech? I think it's a really interesting question, because I think there's sometimes, people will think about the division between MedTech and digital health or digital tech, and actually they're really quite overlapping. As medical devices become more digitized and interconnected, there becomes vulnerabilities. And medical tech, of course, it's complex. And I guess my design colleagues would use it's quite a wicked problem, because it introduces, as we become more digitized, we're introducing the human element, which is really difficult to control, as well as the device, but also the kind of interconnectivity or the software elements. And pretty much most medical devices have some software devices. And often if they're self-regulating, which we really want more of, because people are managing their health at home and self-managing, and that's what we need, then you're also introducing elements of things like people's own devices, introducing apps onto someone's own devices, and you may have the best cyber security in the world, but their operating systems not up to date. So it's kind of it's there. So I mean, one of the things that in terms of actually, we do have some advice from the TGA, but as Gary just talked about, the TGA have certainly talked about regulating a lot of software. They've talked about regulating AI, but we don't have firm regulation. And in this sort of rapidly changing environment, difficult to give those really difficult rules. But so there is some really good advice from the TGA, but they also sort of think about, when you're talking about cybersecurity, it's not just if you like, the medical device security capability. You're also kind of crossing over to things like privacy. So, and so somebody who's developing a device needs to be aware that not only are you thinking about kind of breaches or things that need patching, but things like the notifiable data breaches. If you actually have a device that can then identify people's personal information, which in healthcare is really, really important. So because of kind of what I do, I always go back to the end user, but the end user may be the patient, it may be the user of the tech or the person, but it might also be the clinician who uses it, or the organisation who's responsible for implementing that tech. So even though the digitisation of the technology helps to increase the device functionality or provide some therapeutic benefit, cyber threats, will often kind of have some quite, impactful things like loss of privacy, but also it may actually sort of also stop the device from working, etc. So, I mean, again, going back to that sort of TGA, what they recommend is that they recommend that in your building process, right at the beginning, you actually have a plan for managing those cyber threats. But I think it's acknowledged that with cyber threats going on, you actually also need to have a plan, not just for the threat itself, but how you're going to address those threats in the future that we don't know about yet. And so if I can take off my magic hat of beans, that's really the answer. But I think that also thinking about some of the issues and the solutions is that the more protections we put around devices and accessing devices, the more difficult we make some of our technology to use. And translating that into practice means thinking about, say, a busy GP clinic or residential aged care or nurses or allied health in the field. Adding extra things means that people might take those security things off. So you need to start thinking about how they're usable, that UX that Gary talked about as well. It also means those end users who are challenged, so financially or technologically not literate. And I don't think I'm just talking about end users there, I'm talking about health clinicians. It's not necessarily in their wheelhouse. Yeah. So going back to the TGA, they're really sort of, and I'm going to read from their thing that they say, manufacturers and sponsors need to consider and plan for an evolving cybersecurity landscape to maintain patient safety. And I guess what that says is that, you need to think of it right from the get-go. And also along the way, because translating MedTech into practice and getting uptake means that there also needs to be cybersecurity boundaries around that.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, just like also we at universities are looking to build up, training in AI that's directly related to MedTech. As training in the cybersecurity aspects is also really important. And I think universities are working very hard across the whole gamut of cybersecurity, banks and everything as well, but it's particularly MedTech.
Okay. I get just one thing. We actually had a discussion this morning in a different meeting with CSIRO that health professionals who are the users of these technologies don't have any training in digital or cybersecurity, and that's one of the things that I think is a real potential for things like the BMH to sort of add, not just for the developers, but for all the people who are working in this space to improve their ability and uptake.
Yeah, great, thank you. All right, let's move on to the next question, which is a bit of a different tack, but Andrea, how can we realistically support MedTech startups given our over-reliance on overseas manufacturing? So what needs to change in Victoria, within Australia, to ensure that our companies can stay and be profitable here in Australia?
Thanks, David. I think this is something that people often say, it's difficult to do manufacturing in Australia because we're far away, but I think MedTech provides some really significant opportunities. We saw during COVID the importance of sovereign manufacturing, so I think there's been an attitude shift about the importance of manufacturing here. And I think we also need to focus on our strengths. In Australia, we have a very high quality health system. We have a diverse population that is relatively health literate. We have a great clinical trials support system. So in fact, MedTech companies from overseas come here to do clinical trials quite frequently. And there's strong government support. If you look at the Medical Science Co-Investment Plan released by the federal government just in the last week or so, they highlight MedTech as an opportunity. And I think in trying to support and realise that opportunity, skills is a really major thing. So this is something that the Victorian MedTech Skills and Devices Hub is focused on. It's part of why we were formed. And you mentioned, David, the roadmap. This is something people might be interested to have a look at. We, in collaboration with particularly the Swinburne Edge team, developed a roadmap looking at the skills gaps for MedTech manufacturing and how they map onto current educational offerings. So we did a release of this last year, and it was really interesting to see some of the skills gaps. Things like AI and cybersecurity came out very strongly as areas where we need to grow training, but also commercial skills is very important. That came up over and over again, that people going through the startup journey really need to understand the commercial realities probably better than they currently do. So addressing some of those skills gaps is key. And we're currently in the hub going through a process of redoing that roadmap. So if anyone is interested in contributing, we're open to contributions. We're really keen to hear from the broad industry about where they see the gaps and how we prioritise those. So I think focusing on our strengths and uplifting our skills are two key things. One more I would like to mention is procurement. This is a key thing. If we want to manufacture here, we really want to see that the health dollars, the big part of the Australian budget that is spent on health, goes to procuring things that are locally made when that's possible. So I think that requires some shifting, and I hope that through projects at ACMD and elsewhere, we can help to drive local manufacturers getting procurement contracts for their goods here in Australia.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. So I'd like to come back to you again, Gary, now. And, we've looked at the sort of the manufacturing aspects, the digital components we can think about, the AI and the cybersecurity, and then the manufacturing. But what about the impacts of regulation? And Rachel was mentioning the Therapeutic Goods Administration, the TGA, a few times. And what impact does that have on investors thinking about the willingness to invest in medtech manufacturing in Australia, given that medtech, compared to perhaps a lot of other industries, is highly regulated?
It's a big question, David. Investors in different countries, obviously invest in medtech for different reasons. And they, their expectations on return and how they manage it is very different against, we've seen it in the different countries that we work in. We work in North America, we work in Europe, and we work across Asia as well as Australia. So we find that projects will often get, pivot's not right, but they will move on the basis of some of the investors' influence on the development pathway as a lot of these developers are moving through various elements of their product development. Obviously, the regulatory environment is critical to your selection of those jurisdictions. So if you're looking at ultimately either a large market, in target market, North America or Europe, potentially springboarding from Australia from a target market perspective, you have to be aware of the regulatory environment you're going into. I mean, you obviously run the risk if you don't get that awareness very early of introducing some costs or risks or potentially walls as you get close to those jurisdictions and those compliance obligations start coming to the fore. So our process involves going through an early stage of non-design control, where we get we're largely driven by UX based on some of those jurisdiction parameters, where we'll get some degree of formation of the idea and the device and the product, and even some of the elements of the system and the architecture. But as soon as we possibly can, we want the development program to be informed by the design controls and the related compliance environment that you're moving into. I mean, you're foolish to think that it's not going to get you in the end. So there's a certain degree of development that can be done, but ultimately that compliance obligation is there, and it's best managed by members within the team, because those compliance obligations obviously go beyond product development. They go beyond into you as a manufacturer. And so the sooner that you actually come to terms with managing them, owning them, and taking part in their evolution, the better. So I think that answers the question around the regulatory and the compliance side of things in product development. But it's very, very important also to understand in the early stages of product development, when you're looking at the marketplace, that you're getting important cues from the existing marketplace. And if that marketplace is currently being serviced by US products or solutions, you've got to be looking at predicate devices and other forms of devices to actually frame up your own development pathway. And that can be everything from the UX, the elements of the user experience, right through to the core technologies that you might adopt to actually develop your product as the foundation of your product. So those awarenesses of the jurisdictions that you ultimately will target, the compliance pathway, and the predicate and equivalent market that you're working into, they're information that we would love to see right up front. Founders actually understanding that and being able to inform our very early stage product development with that knowledge.
Great, thank you, Gary. So can I then lead on to another question that we've received through the chat, Gary, which is, what do you think would be the upper limits of growth in MedTech in Melbourne in the next 10 years? What might be constraining growth?
We need to get private sector investment and interest in the sector. We need to get at a sector that's truly investable with confidence by degree of the private sector. At the moment, it's very heavily publicly funded, and I think to actually achieve that, I think that there's definitely the technical capability, there's the trial and the support and supplementary technical capabilities here in Australia. Probably the difference we see between developing or the sector itself, if you like, in places such as North America and here is the degree of skills within the teams, the management teams within those founding bodies. They're able to secure significantly more amounts of private sector money based on the people that are actually both forming the executive teams and forming boards and forming advisory bodies, scientific and technical advisory bodies. So we often see the teams that attract significant amounts of private money in North America. The teams are really a who's who of medical device marketing and development at the end of the day. And I think probably over the next 10 years, if Australia is to actually get, head in that direction and become similarly as competent and as sophisticated, that definitely needs to be an area of focus, whether there's a fully a well-experienced or well-qualified team of people that are driving this product or this device to the market.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Andrea, can I pose the next question to you? What should we be... Oh, I've just lost it. What should we be working towards to better empower MedTech's next generation? And what needs to be done to our current education system to get there?
Thanks, David. One of the things that came up from the roadmap exercise was a need for more specialised offerings relating to MedTech in our existing training. So we're looking at whether we need to have new vocational education courses, but also things like electives and specialisations within higher education, bachelor's, master's training. Another thing that I think is very important is exposure and experience in industry. So one of the things the VMH is trying to do is grow connections. We have a MedTech Industry Connections program where students and representatives from industry can meet each other. We'd love people to sign up for that, raising awareness of what the opportunities are and improving the literacy and the understanding of the students as they go into industry. So hopefully it makes them useful to industry more quickly because they've got that industry experience. There's some of the things we can do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I'll pose the question a little bit differently to you, Rachel. How can we address those skills and education gaps in the ability to navigate ethical and sustainability challenges in MedTech?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I actually want to echo a lot of what both Carrie and Andrea have just said. Actually, I think that there is the sort of skills gaps that we've got from the skills roadmap. We didn't specifically, I guess, look at sort of ethical challenges, but it is something that if we're actually looking at translating into practice, we do need people to have those ethical things. And I think one of the things is that, the universities, and particularly the universities that we've got on board in the VMH, do have that kind of multidisciplinary collaboration. We do have some really excellent colleagues who are not the people that you traditionally think of as the people in MedTech, but they are absolutely looking at the ethics of MedTech. So being able to do some of that multidisciplinary collaboration to build skills, to build the dialogue, and to build the disciplines is really, really important. So that's one way. And I also think that, sort of short courses, there are all sorts of short courses and people will say things, but maybe even embedding in some of our courses an element, because we are going to have to start thinking about the end user at the very beginning. And the other thing that's a bit challenging, though, I think, is that we're often kind of meaning the same thing but use different languages between, say, design, engineering and health. And so having a way that we can actually have share what we mean, and understanding that it is actually about ethics, it is about end users. And we've had some students through our first student who's just graduated from the MedTech Vic Hub has done a really nice thesis on the interaction between design and occupational therapy. And what they found is that they use the same words, that they mean different things. So really it's about having the opportunity for people to really interact through skills development and educational offerings.
Yeah, thanks. All right, let's move on to something a little bit different. So perhaps again to you, Rachel, do you have any where does a clinician or a person living with a disability who has an idea for a new assistive technology start? What opportunities are there to help, perhaps through the VMH or the Vic MedTech Hub?
Come to us. Email us, talk to us, because we can either support you to do it, we can put you in the right place, and we have one of the things that we have through the VMH and is this enormous network. And I think what we have is this building, that's fantastic building, but it's not the building that's really the most important thing. The AC, the Aitkenhead Centre for Medical Discovery, is pushing the boundaries forward, and we will have a physical space to the virtual one that we have at the moment, which is really multidisciplinary, really collaborative, pushing the boundaries. So come to us and we will direct you where you can best go, and support you in finding the resources that will help with that next stage.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Andrea, I'll put the next one to you. I think I might have to rephrase it a bit because I don't quite fully understand what's there. But what support is there for clinicians to be able to look at designing new MedTech products or using data from MedTech and so on?
Yeah, I think as Rachel mentioned, there's a real need for training in some of the sort of technologies that are coming at clinicians. They're coming so fast and they're adapting they're changing very rapidly. I think there is training and offerings for innovative clinicians who see a problem and would like to solve it, such as the support that Rachel can offer at Swinburne. The Australian Clinical Entrepreneur Program has been running recently and supporting a number of clinicians with projects. So there are some various avenues. I think the ACMD will also be a great hub in Victoria for this. One of the things that we are doing there is running challenge workshops. So if a clinician or somebody working in the hospital system identifies a need that might have a technological solution, the ACMD can help to bring together a multidisciplinary panel of people to look at that problem in detail and form a project that can start to address that. So there have been some great successful projects coming out there on things as varied as trying to prevent falls in hospitals through to how do we get more people doing the bowel screening and returning their bowel screening kits so that we can reduce the incidence of bowel cancer in the country. So I think there's a number of avenues, but connecting with MedTech Vic or with the Victorian MedTech Skills and Devices Hub are a great pathway into that network.
Okay, thank you. So I might come back to you, Gary, and put a couple of questions together. One relates to whether the medtech industry can absorb all of the biomedical engineering graduates that are coming through universities, and what does the future there look like? But also, if you could address that, but then follow with what advice would you give to a smart-driven uni student about to enter the real world of medtech?
I mean, obviously, from a point of view of getting experience, post university, there's various sectors. There's consulting, there's in industry, and there's potentially starting your own as a founder of your own startup. So there's a few options that are available to a lot of those engineers. We see graduates already pursuing each of those avenues. Some locally, some also go overseas and explore overseas as well as domestically. So there's a few avenues from a point of view of directions that you can pursue. The ultimate goal, and I think with all of these initiatives and yours, David, as well too, is to grow the local sector so that each of those different streams locally have got the opportunity to expand and grow, so that there's opportunities both for founders here within consulting models such as our own, and also within the manufacturing sector and seeing it applied at the coalface. It's going to take a process of time to do that, because obviously from a commercial perspective, it's got to be commercially sensible to actually grow on those things in a profitable, responsible way. And so, I'm sure that this is ultimately the objective of a lot of these initiatives, and a lot of the government support for this sector is actually to get it to a position where we've got a far greater uptake of graduates into industry that are getting that immediate experience, and the opportunities are far more robust for them to go out and actually potentially take on their own company, either as a side hustle or as a professional choice. So the short answer is that the efforts are going into that, and it does need to develop, and it needs to grow from where it is at the moment. But it's early days. The focus on the biomed or the medtech sector as a target sector for a lot of these expansion efforts. It's common across a lot of jurisdictions. A lot of economies around the world are following medtech and trying to grow the sector. So globally, there's potentially opportunities there for those graduates. But here locally, again, we're on that pathway, and it's a case of again, the efforts that we're putting into it to continue with them.
Okay, thank you for that. So it looks like a question has come through, Andrea, that wants you to build more on your comment about procurement. Asking that healthcare procurement has to maximize value with limited and diminishing budgets, and there is pressure on budgets in hospitals. So how would they be incentivized to buy more from Australian firms?
Yeah, I think that's a really challenging area, something that we at ACMD have been thinking about, and I know that the state government have been thinking about as well. Clearly, the health budget is under a lot of pressure, so we need to make sure that we use those dollars very carefully. But I think that doesn't stop local manufacturers getting more of a share. As Rachel said, the percentage of locally manufactured medical technology is tiny. And if we could grow that to some extent, it would make a big difference to the manufacturing sector, grow that ecosystem here. And one of the things that I think that we can do as a sector, and the VMH is trying to help along with ACMD, is connecting companies that might not necessarily normally supply into health to understand the problems, and maybe connecting companies that have part of a solution together. So maybe that these are ways that we can, rather than providing just cash incentives, which is difficult for the health system and the government, maybe we can provide mechanisms that will help companies to see opportunities, to understand opportunities, and to bid competitively to supply those. You know, it was interesting during COVID that I think the Medihood project that came out of some work with Western Health and the University of Melbourne led to a product that was rapidly able to be manufactured here in Australia by a company that previously had done no medtech manufacturing. But there was a need, there was a motivated clinician, there were university engineering people doing the design, and it all came together and really demonstrated the way you can do local manufacturing, and maybe companies not necessarily in medtech can move into that if there's the right opportunity there. So hopefully we can grow some procurement opportunities in that way. But Rachel might want to add to that as well.
Yes, please.
Sure, thanks. I think it's really interesting because I guess, I mean, one of the things that I would also put to that is that, you know, it's not just down to the procurement officer in the health service. And also health is more about the health procurement, and health is more than about health in hospital settings in terms of medtech. It's in a number of different regions. And what we don't have is a lot of joined up thinking, particularly in outside of hospital environments. And so I think one of the ways that we can really help with that procurement is to get some data around who the end users are and why they can do that, but also some understanding throughout the sector about both upstream and downstream costs, because, you know, the costs that every time we're putting our health dollar overseas, it's actually costing our health service in different parts of that society. So in different parts of that whole ecosystem. So I think having a kind of real ecosystem, and I think this is where the VMH together with the ACMD are really starting to put some muscle behind actually what are the opportunities to do this. Again, kind of that idea around people with the right skills going into medtech or other kind of manufacturing of health products or support products. But I think also, you know, making some awareness, and there's things like in sort of aged care and disability, for example, and understanding that if you put a procurement overlay on something, that you'll take away people's choice and control. Well, actually what you're probably doing is taking away people's choice and control by not giving sort of products that are local ability to be locally sourced, locally repaired, etc., etc. So I think it would be an easy, in a way, it's a kind of easy thing to say, let's just do procurement, and the procurement officers at the hospitals are going, oh God. It's actually much more of a wider thing, and understanding this industry. And as the industry grows, these sort of issues will come to the fore, and then you can start to influence policy and practice.
Yeah, okay, thank you both for that. Just one thing has occurred to me, Andrea, is that you have mentioned ACMD a few times, the Aikenhead Centre for Medical Discovery. Could you tell us a bit about that? It's an initiative both in research, development and education.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, David. So this is a collaborative centre of 8 partners. It includes Swinburne University of Technology, RMIT University, University of Melbourne, along with Australian Catholic University, St Vincent's Hospital Melbourne, St Vincent's Institute of Medical Research, the Bionics Institute, and the Centre for Eye Research Australia. I think I made it to 8 there. So 8 partners coming together really to look at how we use medical technology and biomedical engineering to address human health problems. There will be a new building that is going up on the campus of St Vincent's Hospital Melbourne on the corner of Victoria and Nicholson Streets, a 12-storey building that will be home to some very exciting biomedical engineering and medtech related research from all of those partners. working closely with clinicians and also engaging with industry. There's going to be lots of students in the building. The University of Melbourne Clinical School will move in there, but there will be students studying nursing and allied health and engineering and science and a whole range of disciplines. And it won't matter which institution they come from. I think it will be highly collaborative. There's also an opportunity for co-location in that building. There's actually some spare space at the moment. So it's an opportunity for a range of industries to also be there on the hospital site and with the researchers. So we're hugely excited. The building will open early next year, and the VMH will be located there amongst many other things.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Gary, can I ask you the next question? So what are some of the bottlenecks to securing investment from MedTech innovations?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. What was it, Dave?
What are some of the bottlenecks to securing investment from MedTech innovations?
Yeah, it's the big question, isn't it? Look, a lot of the programs that we work on, the founders are constantly on the hustings looking for financial support for their project, and it's probably the greatest transition, particularly when the adopted CEO of a team realizes that as opposed to doing technology development, they find themselves constantly doing raises to try and continue with the product development. So it is the question is, how do we actually finance these things when we've got to transition from public money, grants, and various other incentives through to actually attracting private money. It's in every economy that's following similar types of initiatives in MedTech and in other forms of development sectors like AgTech, FinTech, in software, for instance. They're all chasing the same amount of financial support and constantly trying to get themselves to market. How do you resolve it? I think, as I was suggesting a little bit earlier on, David, a great deal of the money needs to ultimately transition into the team. It needs to be a robust team that actually can demonstrate that they've got the capacity with a novel technology that has got a market demand, and that they can actually demonstrate that. I think it's probably, if there's a pain point that we know of in talking to investors, it's that a lot of the teams that potentially have a technology core or a technology birth, if you like, amongst the team, is actually being able to really talk the talk from an investment perspective, from a financial return perspective, a market size, a target demographic, and a reimbursement perspective that'll give those investors the confidence to say that you're actually understanding my language, which is I want a return on this money, and how long is it going to take for me to get that return, and what can I expect that to look like? Yeah.
Now, I think this now will lead directly on to the next question, which I'd like to pose to all three of you, is sort of to wrap up. Perhaps if I can get you to respond first, Gary, and then Rachel, and then finally Andrea. What is the biggest challenge ahead, and what do you think is the solution from your different perspectives?
Look, I keep coming back to it. The sector's been incredibly well supported by governments at state level, federal level, and even local level, but certainly with its state and federal level. And it probably will be continuing to be for quite some time. The success of the sector is ultimately going to be in its ability to transition away from public funding and to attract private funding. I think ultimately, given the amount of money that's going to be involved in not only creating a robust development sector, a translation sector, but again, coming back to Andrea's point, actually transitioning that into an element of manufacturing, it's got to ultimately have its foundation from an economic success in being a commercially viable sector, and that involves an awful lot of new dialogue, new skills around what the commercial model actually looks like, and what does that really look like from an economic perspective, other than just, look, we're going to have a demand. It's a sector that our capabilities from a technology and scientific perspective, we've got some advantages, but we have some disadvantages in a commercial because we're a small market here at the end of the day. We're reliant on some of these larger sectors. And that's the type of objective that the business community is looking for you to understand. How does this work from a point of view of being a long-term, good probability of a return sector for me to be involved and interested in?
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. Rachel, what do you think?
Thanks. I'm actually going to take it back to my kind of, the sort of end user and the elements, because I think some of our really fantastic gains in health and medtech, things like end users gaining more control over their healthcare, they expect more quality, and the medtech is really improving those experiences. But I think there's two kind of things that come out of that. And one of them is that the gap between people who are very technologically literate and can use all of those things and then people who aren't. And also, as part of that, the technology literacy of the healthcare workforce is probably one of the really big factors in ensuring that people use the right technology, they recommend the right technology, they recommend to their procurement officers or whoever the technologies that are the right ones. And really, I think the solution is upskilling of that healthcare workforce, both at undergraduate level, sort of trying to sort of influence. And I'm very aware as a university academic of the difficulties with matching competencies, but making sure maybe some of those competencies do think about keeping up with the different sort of both ethical but also technological advances, but providing also opportunities for clinicians in the field to upskill in a way that is accessible. It's really kind of those are the ways of doing it. It's kind of, if you like, education in terms of addressing that at the end user level.
Yeah, thank you for that. Andrea, what do you think?
Yeah, I think one of the most striking things is how challenging it's going to be for our hospital and health system to cope going into the future as the population grows and we age. We seriously need alternative ways to look after our population and maintain our quality of life and hopefully improve it. So I think medical technology is crucial to that. It's really has to be a major part to addressing this health system challenge. And a key part of that is getting the skills. So training people across the spectrum to be ready for that in the commercial skills, in the user needs, in all of those different aspects. And I think from an education provider viewpoint, being adaptable and working together is something that we have typically not, as universities, necessarily been very good at. And I hope that through initiatives such as the VMH and the ACMD, we will be able to collaborate more and tailor offerings that will better suit both students and industry and hopefully help to address the challenge.
Okay, thank you. Now, unfortunately, our time has come to an end. On behalf of the MedTech platform and the University of Melbourne, I'd like to thank our panel, Gary, Andrea, and Rachel, for their contributions to the discussion today. Thank you to our illustrator, Zara. What a great way to capture today's discussions and learnings. Amazing how you could fit all that in. I'd like to thank our audience also for all the questions and interests in this important issue. We'd appreciate your input on our post-event survey, which is located at the bottom of the video stream and in the Q&A chat box. We value your feedback to help us shape the future of our MedTech webinar series. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and have a great day.